listening to untold things move around me perilously through the blackness. Somebody knocked on the door around 10 p.m. After an entire day of endless boredom, I thought this might be my salvation. Thank God. Maybe a maintenance worker, maybe a neighbor, maybe my friend from down the block finally convinced his mother to traverse the minefield of imaginary live wire. I got up from my chair to answer the door. My father sprinted across the room to block me. I don't think I'd ever seen him run before. He put his hand over my mouth. I tried to protest.
Hello.
He squeezed my arm. He didn't look angry. He looked scared. His eyes were on fire. It grew quiet outside, like someone was listening. One finger over his lips told me to shut up. I looked over to my mom and saw her doing the same thing to my brother. He looked like he wanted to cry. The knocking resumed. The pace was pleasant at first. Your typical formal but friendly rat-tat-tat. Then a pause. A knock. I was confused.
What's up, guys?
Why were they scared? Why
Whoever,
would a
what guy
burglar knock? I thought that this could be somebody who could tell us what was going on, and it annoyed me that my parents were paranoid. So I got the idea to try saying something anyway. Not my best thought.
What's up? Oh, well, hi. Welcome in, Alex. Thanks for coming
My
in.
name is Roger. I'm from Minnesota, and I came across your YouTube channel at the beginning of this year. I'm a retired forest ranger, having spent the better part of 3 decades working for the U.S. Forest Service Law Enforcement and Investigations Division. Since my retirement, I've had plenty of time on my hands, and over the past few months, I spent a lot of that time listening to various anthologies that you published. I think it's awesome that you publish the stories of regular folks like me, so with that in mind, I think I have a story that you might be
Hi, how
interested
are you?
in. It seems a little strange that I'm so excited to tell you about this, as
I'm
it's
doing
not
good.
exactly
I'm
the kind of
just
thing most
posting
people want
videos
to
on my
hear.
page.
I used to wonder how you get so many people wanting to share the bad memories with you, but after having thought about it for a while, I think I figured it out. These aren't the kind of things that we can talk about around the dinner table in polite company, and I've never had a single person ask me in the flesh, what was the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? People don't want to know, at least not the kind of people I've ever associated with, but at the same time, these are things that, for whatever reason, we want to share with people, and much like your channel's viewers, I'm pretty apt to lend my ear to a story that's a little darker. And
Never
so,
mind.
without
Thank
further
you for liking.
rambling on,
How are you?
This is the story of one of the truly terrifying
All
moments
right,
of my time
Alex,
as
I'll
a
see you
forest
later.
ranger. For the vast majority of my career, I was posted in the Voyageurs National Park up near the Canadian border. Since the park is split in two by a series of lakes, it's popular with fishermen and kayakers. But these lakes are also populated by many small islands, many of which are popular camping spots.
Me too.
People come up to the VNP to get away from the
Thank
city
you.
and get some privacy, and it doesn't get much
Hi,
more
how
private
are
than
you
your own
guys?
personal island, really, does it? Well, one afternoon I got a call from the
man.
chief ranger asking me to do him a little favor. He got the call from the International Falls Police Department, IF being a small border city about 20 miles to the west, after an officer over there had received a missing persons report. Some lady's husband had gone on a camping trip with an old friend and had failed to return after being due back that morning. My husband was to head over to their regular camping spot on a place called Wolf Island to see if they'd moved on or not. The ranger team at VNP is probably one of the most amphibious in the
Do I have
country,
a father?
definitely
Yeah.
the most waterborne in the region. Half of our job consists of policing the waterways and making sure all fishing and boating is within regulation, so not only do we have ready access to kayaks and motorboats, but we're very comfortable operating them. So when I got the call, I headed to the Ash River Visitor Center, which was where we docked our boats. But then, just as I'm prepping the boat to sail over to Wolf Island, I get a second call from the chief. The IFPD had reached out with an update, one I needed to be informed of immediately. According to the chief, this wasn't just a case of two fishermen having overslept after too many Miller Lights. The missing man's son had been in touch, and this time, it was to warn law enforcement that not only was his father most likely armed, but had been acting extremely erratically prior to the departing for the camping trip. This is not what I had been hoping to hear when I heard that there was an update, but I was more than equipped to deal with the situation. Seeing as I was on the law enforcement side of things, as opposed to working solely at the visitor center, I had pretty much all the same options as your average police officer. But that didn't mean that I wasn't feeling a sense of apprehension regarding what I might run up against. 9 times out of 10, incidents in the park are resolved quickly and peacefully, but as you can probably guess, it's 1 in 10 that keep you up at night. So after prepping the boat, I sailed west for around 20 to 25 minutes until I spotted Wolf Island. After using my binoculars to observe the island from a safe distance, I can make out a slight plume of smoke coming from its eastern side. I could have really done with some kind of bullhorn to call out to the missing camper, but I didn't have the good sense to bring one. So I was forced to bring my boat right up to within about 20 or 30 feet of the shore before calling out using nothing but my lung power. I called out once. And
Do
then
I
twice,
have
and
AC?
after the
Yes,
third
I have
call
AC.
received no response, I decided to make landfall in order to get a visual on the campfire, which presumably had been started by our missing camper. I brought the boat up a little closer, hopped overboard, then waded my way ashore, calling out to our missing camper all the while. I could smell the campfire by that point, along with whatever was cooking on it, so I was doubtless within earshot of whoever had been tending to it.
My name is Brendan White, and I used to get food from the McDonald's restaurant close to my house every day. A couple of months ago, I walked in to get something and was attended by a new female employee named Mary. She was middle-aged, had short brown hair, and was slightly overweight. While I waited for my order, she tried to get to know me, making small talk. I didn't mind at the time. She seemed nice, and there was nothing odd about our conversation. After giving me my sandwich, I left, not knowing that visiting McDonald's that day would lead to my biggest mistake ever. The next few days after meeting her weren't that different
What's
from
up,
the first.
guys?
But as more days went by, I began to notice something strange about Mary. For starters, Mary was always the one taking my orders. This was unusual for McDonald's. To make things worse, the conversations she tried to have with me only became weirder and left me uncomfortable in most situations. She would say strange things like how I looked so sexy and tasty, and sometimes ask me questions that no employee should have been interested in. Everything about Mary's behavior was odd. She looked almost 10 years older than me and didn't strike me as that sort of person in any way. Eventually, I began visiting another McDonald's far away from my house, deciding against reporting Mary and getting her fired. A couple of weeks went by, and one day, I walked into the new McDonald's and saw Mary working at the counter. I was shocked and expected her to tell me if she was filling in for someone, but instead, Mary acted as if she'd never left the old McDonald's and didn't address the situation at all. She resumed her usual attempts at small talk and disturbing remarks, but I simply ignored everything she said, got my order, and left. I decided not to go to McDonald's for a while, and only had it when a few friends placed orders at their apartments. I didn't know if Mary still worked there, but I wasn't eager to find out. One afternoon, while walking home after getting groceries, someone suddenly bumped into me out of nowhere, and most of my groceries failed. I bent over to pick them up, and the woman who had bumped into me began apologizing as she joined me to pick up the groceries. When I looked up to thank her, I was shocked to see Mary standing in front of me.
Oh, no.
I remained in silence as my mind raced. Was this woman stalking me, or was this just a coincidence?
Yo, what's up?
After standing there in silence, Mary finally said, "Well, young man, I'm in a hurry, so sorry about that," and left, acting like she didn't know who I was. I brushed it off again as a coincidence and walked home. As I got home, I realized my house keys weren't on me, but I was in a hurry and figured I had probably left without them. So I quickly got my spare key from under the mat, dropped my groceries inside, and left to meet up with my colleagues. My coworkers and I spent a couple of hours getting drunk and playing games on our day off. I left and headed home. But as I opened my door, something about it felt different. That feeling you get when someone else has been in your home was everywhere, but I was wasted, and all I wanted to do was take a shower. So I quickly looked around and headed to the bathroom. Later that night,
How
I
do you
was
know I
alone in
have
my
a
living
gold
room watching
play
HBO when my phone rang.
Fell off the wall.
I was curious about who could be calling me so late at night,
And it got
so I answered
dented.
with a simple, "Hello?" There wasn't a voice on the other end, but I could hear someone breathing heavily for about a minute before finally hearing a whispery voice say, "Come upstairs." I ended the call
what
immediately,
noise?
assuming it was some kids
I'm
playing a
listening
prank,
to a
but something
scary
about
story.
it felt off. At first,
Is it too
I
loud?
stopped thinking about it, and how I felt someone was in my home earlier that day. About 3 minutes later, my phone rang again, and it was the same number. I simply ignored it and tried to focus on something else. That's when I heard a noise coming from upstairs. I quickly switched off the TV and decided
You
to
better
listen more
eat your
closely to
dinner.
make sure I wasn't hearing anything. Sure enough, I heard a loud noise from upstairs, followed by another, and soon enough, I could tell there were footsteps.
First-
Someone was actually in my home.
Hi.
I quickly grabbed the phone and called
I look
police.
bad?
Grabbing the knife.
That's all
The
good.
house was silent.
They're probably in bed.
So I began to walk up the stairs slowly to make sure there was actually no intruder. As I checked each room one after the other, I began to calm down and question if I heard anything at all. Eventually, there was only one room left to check, and as I opened the door to the guest room, I was filled with a feeling of relief as all I could see was an empty room. And the sense of relief I had just gotten was quickly overcome with fear. As out of the corner of my eye, I could see a figure standing behind the door. Before I could say anything, the person jumped on me, knocking the knife out
Hi.
of my hand and
You're
set it
back?
on top of me,
It's good
pinning
to
both
see
my
you.
arms under her. At that moment, all I could feel was terror as Mary looked me dead in the eye.
What's your
before
profile
proceeding to
pic?
grab the knife I had dropped.
Is that me?
Slowly brought her head closer to me and began
What's that
to
face you're making, bro?
This game is Simon Says. Are you ready? Simon Says touch your
That's a
nose.
scary face,
no
bro.
as Mary was a lot heavier than I was.
Simon Says
She eventually stopped sniffing me and proceeded to say, Oh, I missed you so much, baby.
Where?
But you've been avoiding me lately. You look so tasty.
Just kidding.
I had to. And well, now I have to take a little bite. She smiled and continued. Now, it'll hurt a little, but I'm sure you don't mind, darling. Mary quickly brought down the knife on my hand, taking my pinky finger clean off. The pain shot me.
Are you ready?
And I could help but let
Simon
out
says
a
touch your nose.
blood began to spill everywhere, and Mary couldn't hold back her laugh as she threw my finger in her mouth and chewed it down until nothing remained. At that point, I had begun to close my eyes as I slowly lost consciousness from the pain. That's when Mary said, "No,
You
baby,
will lose
don't
this
do
game
that.
of Simon
I was
Says.
just about to have one of your tastier parts." She then proceeded to hold my eyelids open as she lowered the knife slowly towards my eye. Before I could begin to plead with her,
You like my
"Please,
orange
I
shirt?
was
Thank you."
scared, and I was immediately filled with relief. Mary quickly got off me and pointed the knife at me, saying, "No, how did they find out, baby? You didn't cause them, did you?" One look at the woman in front of me, and I could tell she was absolutely crazy. She began pacing the room and was visibly worried, so I decided it was better to play into her game than act out, as I already knew how far she was willing to go.
Thank
"I'm
you.
so
What's
sorry.
going on
I
with
didn't know
you?
it was you waiting for me, so I called them. Just let me go down there and send them away, and I'll be right back." Mary looked at me with what seemed to be relief, and I could tell she truly believed what I had just said. She replied, "All right, honey, be quick now," and lowered the knife, letting me leave. I bolted downstairs with one thing in mind: get as far away
How's your
from
day
Mary as
going?
I could. As I stepped out of the house, I was met by a group of officers. They asked if anyone else was in the house before storming in.
Luda Chris.
Still got cameras on.
Mary was taken away in tears as she screamed at me for betraying her and not keeping my word, confirming to the police that she was completely crazy. In the last few days, I've been informed by the authorities that Mary is wanted in several states for multiple counts of rape, assault, and suspicion of cannibalism. I was
What
lucky
the
enough to
heck?
be the only one of her victims to survive her ordeal. That encounter still keeps me up at night, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about the first time I met Mary in McDonald. I hope my story has helped you all realize that we really know nothing about the people who serve us.
Thank you
like
for
families
the-
at McDonald's.
what's going
In
on?
my case, I met a crazy serial killer who posed as a happy-go-lucky woman.
I've got
But in your case,
cameras
it
on
just
you.
might be the devil who hands you your happy meal with a smile on their face. Hello. We are thrilled you have been joining our video. Your support means the world to us. If you've liked what you've seen, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. We would love to hear which one
Thank
of our
you.
videos is your favorite. We're on a mission.
Thank
to
you
reach
for
100,000
supporting the
members
original
in the
creator.
SSG family. And with your help, we can
A
achieve
lot of
that
people
goal.
use my sounds
Thank
and
you
don't
for
give me
being a part
credit.
of our journey.
I still got cameras on you.
I still got cameras on you.
Christmas is usually one of the best holidays of the year. The kids are always happy. There's food, parties, and presents. It's really that time of year when we can leave all our problems behind and concentrate on being happy, even if it's just for a day or two. The story I'm about to tell you was just before Christmas. In those days when we were getting ready for the holidays and it was all happy times. What neither I
Where do
nor
I
my
live?
chief
I live in
expected
Arizona.
was that those moments of happiness would be interrupted
I'm in
because we had an appointment
Arizona.
with the unknown. Something we didn't understand at the time, and still don't today, was stalking us. And you know what? It still is. If you don't know what you're up against, how can you defeat it? It all started on a snowy day. During those days, we decided to take a mini vacation and went to my parents' country house. My wife was hesitant to go since we had a lot of work to
I'm
do
in
to get back.
Arizona.
The kids were on vacation from school and insisted all year to go, so we indulged. It was only a few days before Christmas.
Rock, paper,
We had already
scissors.
put up the Christmas tree and decorated our house and town. But the cabin still lacked some Christmas spirit. We brought some decorations to beautify the cabin with, but to my surprise, my parents had left us something. A human-sized Santa Claus. It looked like an animatronic, but it was very strange. It was too thin. Normally,
I'm
Santa
watching
Clauses are similar to
scary
Santa,
animated stories
fat with a huge
while I
smile.
post my
But there
videos.
was something weird about this one. His look was heavy. He looked like some Santa Claus out of some child's nightmares. I was about to put it away, but my kids saw it at the same time I did.
Takes
And
a
for
lot of
some
time
reason,
to
they
think.
liked it. Kids really do have the weirdest tastes. Other than that, the day continued as normal. We spent the evening watching movies and eating something as a family. The kids seemed very entertained, and my wife and I were very happy about it. Nothing prepared us for what would happen the next day. After spending the night sleeping comfortably, a scream woke my wife and me at the same time. It was the scream of one of our children. As soon as we woke up, we both looked out the window where the scream was coming from. My two children were outside, running through the snow, running away from someone. When I looked back, I clearly saw their attacker.
He looks like
It
somebody.
couldn't be true. It was the Santa Claus animatronics I had put up yesterday.
I don't know what you're talking
This
about.
didn't make any
Ginger
sense.
Dread
As I
Monkey.
watched him run in the direction of my children,
I
could
think
see
I've
him walk
seen you
very
before.
rapidly.
Have you been on here before?
This was not an
But
animatronic.
your
or
name
anything
sounds
like
familiar.
that. It moved like a human, but it was so thin. Who could fit into our costume? I told my wife to call the police as soon as possible while I would get our children and protect them from their attacker. At that point, I didn't care about bundling up or getting a gun. I had to go as soon as possible. As soon as I got out, I did not go in the direction of my children, but towards my attacker, who for some reason was not running, but only walking in the direction of my children. I don't know what this being was or why it was attacking my children, but I knew I had to do something to stop it. With all
Do
my
I have
strength,
Robux?
threw
Yeah, I
myself
do.
at it. I still thought that all this must have some explanation. Maybe it was a person disguised as a Santa. Yes, that must be it. That was the only logical explanation. A little confident from what I had fed myself, I tried to take him down, but
Yeah,
that
which one do you
despair
wanna
and
see?
desolation took over my whole
You want
life.
this one? This is the
Just a
one.
few inches away from him, about to knock him down.
It's not for, I don't think it's for this channel though.
That prevented me from moving forward.
I play Fortnite as well.
Defeated and crying, I fell to the ground, clutching my chest from the pain I felt. This was not the pain of a physical attack. It was not the pain of an illness. It was the pain
Bro.
one feels when one is visiting
Bro.
Saturn. Santa simply ignored me and kept walking in the direction of my children. Whatever it was.
Only
it was
boys
aware
can
of what
pass
happened.
this test.
Possibly in some way, he caused it. Since he didn't flinch.
Only
against
boys
my
can
attack,
do this.
Knowing what was going to happen. After a few seconds that felt like hours, I got all my strength to get up and follow him. The pain and sadness I felt at that moment was so great that even though it faded as soon as Santa left, it still haunted me. For me, I would have stayed on the ground surrounded by ice crying, but I couldn't afford the luxury. That being was after my children, and I wouldn't let them feel for a second what I felt at that moment, or worse. I got up and ran as fast as I could, to be honest. My children and Santa were already far away in the forest, but the sound of their screams guided me on the right path. With every centimeter I ran, I could feel that horrible feeling taking over my body again. The pain in my chest was getting bigger and bigger. I couldn't be far away.
Only girls can pass this test.
Crying against the tree, I found my two children.
Hey, thank
In front
you,
of them, the strange
Ludacris.
figure walked
You're cool
slowly in
too.
their direction. As soon as I saw this,
Hey,
figure,
Copy
I turned
Coder,
to
thank
the
you for saying
You
hi.
would think that nothing had changed from the last time I did it, and ended up on the ice crying. But for me, everything had changed. This time, I was watching as the strange being was about to attack my children, and at that moment, I didn't care about anything but protecting them. I ignored the pain, the fear, the sadness, the cold. All I could see was this thing
Don't
approaching my
like
children.
this video
With a
or
war
something
cry,
bad
I
will
launched
happen.
it and knocked it to the ice. Blinded by rage, I didn't realize what was really going on. I was just hitting an empty Santa Claus doll. All the feeling of fear.
I'm being
and
kind of
desperation
boring right now
vanished
because
when
I'm
I made
working.
contact with them. Now I was doing nothing more than hitting an inanimate object while my children cried beside me. When I realized this,
Thank
I stepped
you.
aside and went to hug
You're
my
right,
children
that's about-
while Santa stood destroyed next to us.
That's about when I started.
Once we got back, I threw all the parts of that
Happy
Santa Claus
birthday,
in the
pet
trash.
lover forever.
Once we got home. I'll be honest with you. The new Santa Claus didn't last more than 2 days.
Yeah, I started one of these
Maybe I
channels
was
in
still a little
October. The
paranoid,
other one I
but
kind of
swear
started
that
in
every
October
once
as
in a
well
while,
too.
It felt like it wasn't
But
the
I
same
had that
situation
channel
I
for
did.
like a year,
As
just
if
with
his
nothing
hair
on it,
was
really.
moving when no one was watching. Also, I couldn't shake this feeling.
That's this channel.
This feeling of paranoia that when I was near him, I was constantly being watched.
Only girls can
My
fail
children
this
didn't talk
test.
about it, but I could see in their eyes that they were terrified. At first, my wife thought everything I told her was a
Only
joke,
girls will pass
but over
this
time,
test.
she began to believe us. Although part of her thinks it's a strange collective paranoia. I can't blame her, and I can't blame you if you don't believe me. Not even in my wildest nightmares could I think something like this could happen. I guess, as a human, there are things we can never understand. And you know what? It's okay. I don't want to understand what happened that day. I just don't want it to happen again.
Thank
I
you.
just want my family to be safe.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Working at Burger King was an average job for a guy like me.
I was on TikTok first,
Often the
but
nights
they
were
banned
fun,
me in
with only a handful
October.
of customers
So
coming
then
in
I
for a
moved
quick
to
dinner
over
before
to
closing.
YouTube.
But on that particular night, the story I'm about to tell you was anything but ordinary. I was alone on the night shift, as usual, and the clock read 10 p.m. when it all started. The night was cold and dark, and the rain was pounding on the windows of the restaurant,
I don't know, is
creating
it
a
lag?
gloomy atmosphere.
Could be my internet.
I finished cleaning the tables and was about to close when I saw a lone man standing outside in the pouring rain. He wore a black jacket and a hat that hid half his face, but something about his posture sent a shiver down my spine. I still couldn't refuse entry to a customer, so I opened the door for him.
Thank you for
The
letting
man
my
walked in without saying a word,
copy
just
10, thank
staring
you.
at me with his cold, dark eyes.
Double tap the
He
screen.
ordered a hamburger and a
Okay.
soda, and I prepared for him.
Everybody!
The atmosphere in the
Oh, you
restaurant
saw me
was
on
strange,
Snapchat? I got
as
banned off there,
silence
too.
and tension had taken over the place.
I had a
As
million
delivered his
subscribers
food,
on
I tried to make
Snapchat,
friendly
and
conversation,
they
but
banned
the
me.
man didn't respond. He just kept staring at me. Something in his gaze made me uneasy, but I decided not to pay much attention to it. The
Thank
man
you for
sat
all
in
the
corner of
support,
restaurant
Micaiah.
alone,
It's very
silent.
nice of you.
I continued with my usual tasks, but I couldn't help but feel watched. A few minutes passed, and I noticed that the man didn't touch his food.
Thank you, Ludacris.
I felt uncomfortable, as if
Everybody
I were in a scene from a
Put
horror.
W in the chat for Ludacris.
Finally, I decided to approach
And
him ask if
Micaiah.
everything was
Thank you
okay.
for all your support. I couldn't have this without you.
Is everything all right?
I appreciate it.
The man looked up, but instead of answering, he smiled in a disturbing way. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and his teeth looked sharp as knives. At that moment, I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't just let it go. The man finally spoke, and his voice was soft and creepy. I like your restaurant. It's a
W
good
in the
place.
chat. Thank you for the W's.
Leave alone.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
Like
didn't
that
know what
screen.
to
Double
answer, so I
tap.
just nodded
W,
and
W.
walked away from
Ow!
his table. I walked back to the counter, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that came over me. The night was slowly progressing, and the man was still
Thanks,
sitting in
Micaiah.
his
Thanks,
corner,
Bovid.
not touching his food.
Thanks for all the
I decided
W's.
to call the manager and tell him what was going on. The call was mysteriously cut off.
I need to
before I
find-
could say a word.
Oh no, you're
I
gonna
felt
wake
like I
up
was
with.
trapped in a silent nightmare. I decided to take a break and headed for the bathroom. I
Creepy
needed a
clowns.
moment to regain my composure. While I was in the bathroom, I heard footsteps outside. As I came out, I saw the man walking around the restaurant, looking at everything as if he were inspecting every nook and
Can
cranny.
can you,
I didn't know what to do. but I
Can
knew
you
I
see
couldn't
my
stay
what?
hidden in the bathroom
Hold your
forever.
breath in 3.
When I returned to the counter, the man approached and finally broke his silence.
No, I haven't seen Deadpool yet.
You have an
I wanna
interesting
see it.
place here. I like it a lot. His
Watch
words
out
were
for
unsettling,
clowns.
and his gaze kept boring a hole into me. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said thank you, trying to remain calm. The clock struck midnight, and the man still didn't
Mr.
touch his
Tahoe.
food. At that moment, I realized I couldn't let this continue.
Thank you.
I
Appreciate
asked him if he needed anything else, if he was satisfied with his dinner.
Glad it's working for you, not me.
I needed to share that.
How did you meet?
My heart began to pound.
My sounds just get
I was
stolen.
not allowed to show
Yeah.
customers the kitchen, and something about the
And
way he
get
was
zero
asking,
credit
maybe even more
by bigger
uneasy.
creators.
I politely explained that I couldn't do that it was against restaurant policy. The man was unfazed. He simply got up from his chair and started walking towards
Yeah,
the kitchen.
4K subs? Cool.
I reacted as quickly as I could and started to press the panic button behind the counter. But I didn't know if it was working. The button didn't react and didn't make any
What am I
sound.
doing right
Who
now?
knows? Maybe it didn't work months ago. Maybe it never did. Terrified, I made a really bad decision. Driven by pure fear combined with my survival instinct, I ran after him, trying to stop him.
I don't know
I
who
begged him
that
not to come
is.
in, but he wouldn't listen. When he reached the kitchen, he stopped and started looking around as if he was looking for something. I felt trapped between my duty to protect the restaurant and the fear that was gripping me. The man walked over to one of the meat cleavers we had in the kitchen and picked it up. At that moment, I knew I had to do something. I grabbed the frying pan and prepared to defend myself, even though it was clear I was at a disadvantage. Do you know what silence is, kid?
Yeah, probably is good. I've been hearing that stupid song on.
Silence.
I've been hearing the song on YouTube where he goes, Wolverine,
The
Deadpool,
man
Wolverine,
advanced
where they're
towards
fighting.
his blade held
Have you seen
high.
that?
I prepared to defend myself with the frying pan, but it was useless.
My
He
favorite
pulled the
movie
pan out of my
used to
hand
be
as
The
if I were a
Matrix.
child playing with something dangerous. Like a cornered animal, I fell to the ground crying, accepting my fate, aware
Yeah, I
that
gotta
couldn't
start
do
making
anything to
commercials
defend
this
myself
time.
against this man. In retrospect, I could have tried to run. I could have thrown myself at him. Anything would have been better than just giving up like that. But you know, it really is impossible to act logically in
I
that
can't
situation.
play that song. It's
All I
probably
could think of was
copyrighted
that
and
a few
all.
hours earlier, I was at
I
home,
won't get paid.
getting dressed for a morning workday, thinking about what
Hi,
to eat.
Gia. How are you?
Suddenly, it was all over. Now I was condemned to death by a man I didn't know.
Black-eyed
His
children.
motives were totally unknown. I was just simply going to be the victim of a sick man who was going to kill me for fun. As if knowing what I was thinking and how defeated I felt. The man left the knife on the table and began to rub his hands across my neck, enjoying every second in which I couldn't defend myself. At that moment, I realized something even more terrible. The knife was just to scare me more, but he never intended to use it. I mean, he didn't need to. He just wanted to torture me, to make my death last as long as possible.
Thank
I
you,
could see in his
Ludacris.
face,
So
in
are
his
you.
sick and twisted eyes, how he was going to enjoy what he was about to do to me. Slowly,
glad
the
I've
man put
seen
his
you.
hands on my neck.
I remember you.
I could feel the veins in his hands getting more and more pronounced.
Yeah, I'm making
While
videos
very
right now.
slowly, his hands applied pressure to my neck. Little by little, I began to lose my breath. The force in his hands was getting stronger and stronger. What would happen first? Would I die
Yeah,
of
I wasn't a
suffocation?
big fan of the
Would my
Transformers
neck
movies.
break? All I could think about was my family, my girlfriend, my pets. What were they doing right now? Could they have imagined that I was about to die? My vision started to get blurrier. I was fainting. But then, suddenly, the sound of police sirens became audible outside.
Go to bed, bro.
The man stopped and listened. For a moment.
What's my real name is Jonathan.
Police lights flashed outside, and we heard the officers enter.
Jonathan Hopkins.
The officers approached the man and detained him. Apparently, the emergency button worked and alerted my boss, who saw on the cameras everything that was going on. The man was arrested and taken out of the restaurant in handcuffs. He didn't say a word as he was led away, but his cold stare and disturbing smile remained etched in my mind. After he was taken away,
All right.
returned to the restaurant.
Copyton, thank you for your
My
support
manager
for coming
arrived
in.
soon after, concerned and relieved at the same time. I
Well, what's
explained
the
what
right-
happened, and he thanked me for taking steps to protect the place. He assured me that the man
Oh,
would
I'm
not
glad
cause
they
trouble again, but I was
comment
no
on your
longer
videos,
interested.
man. It's good.
I would never set foot in that Burger King again.
I don't know. Is there a Hopkins in Stranger
Although
Things?
the
I
man
only
was
saw the
arrested,
first season. It was a
I
long
never
time
knew who he
ago.
was or why he'd come to the restaurant that night.
No, that's
The
my real
experience
name.
left me with a lingering sense of unease and fear.
See?
The silence and the look of the psychopathic man stayed with
See
me.
right here? It
long
says
after he was
Jonathan
taken away.
Hopkins. Apostrophe
That
official.
night of terror at Burger King was an experience I'll never forget. I learned that
Oh,
sometimes
that's
evil
his
can
name.
lurk in the most unexpected places, and that silence can be more terrifying than any scream. Since then, I never looked at a hamburger the same way again.
I always say
And I always made
Toyota
sure the doors
Supra
to my house were
when people
locked.
ask me that.
I couldn't help but feel that sooner or later, that man would come back to my house to finish what he started.
The date was June 15th, 2014. My team and I had decided to finally investigate the old asylum that stood alone
Hopkins.
abandoned in Williamsburg, Virginia. This particular abandoned asylum had been the talk of the town for many years prior, with multiple stories and myths, the most famous being about students who snuck in and were found days later completely silent and void of themselves. According to the locals, the government followed up by launching an investigation, sending officials to uncover what had happened. But their findings were so grave, they decided to sweep the case under the rug, hiding all students, parents, and officials who entered the asylum. The case was eventually buried, and the asylum was completely sealed off as toxic and harmful. The history of the asylum, while it was functioning, was still unknown, and the details of the students who explored it after it was abandoned are also unknown. My name is Jacob Benedict, and these are the details of how my team and I uncovered the terrifying secrets of the Williamsburg abandoned asylum. My team consisted of 5 individuals, including me, and at the time, we'd only been paranormal investigators for about 3 years. In these 3 years of working cases and seeing all sorts of things, we had come to the conclusion that despite whatever stories were told, they were just stories, and there really was no such thing as ghosts, creatures, or things that go bump at night. In this particular case, we heard first about it in March 2014, and finally decided to make the trip to the asylum in June. We got to the town late that day, and didn't do much
Nice.
except lodge in our hotel and brief on the case.
Cocoa Pops?
We were immediately struck by the
I
inconsistencies
want
and the
some.
lack of information about the asylum.
Bro
We
has
set this
2
case
billion
apart from anything we had encountered
era?
in the past.
I don't know what that means.
It piqued our curiosity and fueled our determination to uncover its secrets. The next day, we headed into town and split up into 2 groups, with 3 of my colleagues heading to the library to try to find out more about the history of the asylum, while Jessica, another one of my colleagues, and I went around town asking locals for any information they had. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions? I said as we approached a middle-aged lady in the street. She replied with,
Yes, sure. But I'm in a hurry and I don't have much time.
"Yeah, no problem. It'll be quick. Can you provide us with any information on your town's old asylum?" I said. The expression on her face changed slightly before responding.
I'm gonna make some
Well,
spaghetti.
I can't tell you much. If it has to do with that asylum, I
Give
know
him
just
the
as
most
much.
likes to his videos when I comment like 5,000.
More
Okay.
information than we did. So I said, "Oh, I apologize. I
If I
assumed
see
since you
you
lived here, you know a lot more than
Comment
I do."
on one of my videos
Well,
right now.
I can see how you'd think that, but I'm sorry. I
On this
don't know
channel,
much. I don't think
all
you
like
know
and
you speak
comment.
to know much either. Ever since I moved here, I've understood that the asylum is something to stay far away from.
She paused for a minute before saying,
Of course,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are still stories and ideas, but I'll tell you with goodwill. Nothing good comes from that asylum. It's best you
Get
leave
in
it
the
alone.
mic.
despite saying she knew nothing, something about this lady's warning felt real to me. I also noticed she mentioned she moved here, so I decided to ask. So, before you leave, do you know if maybe there's anyone who grew up here and maybe knows something that could help us? She looked annoyed, but slowly replied,
A lot of people grew up in this town, but the only one I can think of to help is Mary. Her family was involved somehow with the asylum, and she doesn't live that far.
After that, the lady kindly gave us directions to Mary's house, and in less than 10 minutes, We were standing at our front door.
Spaghetti
The house
casserole?
was
Sure,
extremely
you can have
large
some.
and quiet, but it was obviously old, and I could tell just by looking at it that there hadn't been any repairs in years. We knocked, and in about 2 minutes, an elderly lady opens the door slightly.
Can I help you?
She said, standing behind the door. Yes, we're looking for Mary. We wanted to ask a few questions about the abandoned asylum, I replied. The woman remained silent for a while before reluctantly inviting us into the home. The house's interior was just as run down as its exterior.
Eat
with
your
the paint
dinner.
peeled off and its floors
Eat your
confirming
dinner.
That the house was.
Go to bed, bro!
Mary showed us a couch.
Don't you
Informed us
dare
here
like
that
this
she was
video
needed.
and tell me no.
She returned a few minutes later with a file completely covered in dust and told us everything there was to know about the abandoned asylum was in there.
Yeah, I played
After a
for
while of talking, we discovered Mary's
haven't
grandfather
played
was
in a
head of
while, though.
operations at the asylum while it was running, and he passed away shortly after it was closed. She explained
Maybe
that
I'll
the
live
file was put
stream
together by an employee
for you
at the
guys
asylum
one of
during
these
an
days.
investigation
Play
that
Fortnite.
eventually resulted in the closing of the asylum.
or we will try.
The case was handled quietly.
I will-
and the family obtained
I will
the
try
file after the
Roblox for
asylum
1,000
was closed,
likes.
keeping it to
No.
avoid any scandal for leaks. However, when the kids went missing, the police asked Mary's father for information, and again, the file was used quietly, and the government found its contents too problematic and swept the case under the rug.
Yeah.
Mary appeared emotional talking about this. She proceeded to tell us she'd uncovered the contents of the file after her father's passing and had been burdened by the guilt of keeping it all hidden.
I wasn't going to help you at first, but you seem like good people. I think you will do the right thing with that file and bring light to the activities of what went down at that asylum.
Mary seemed to have confused us for a journalist or some sort, so I responded with, Mary, there seems to be a bit of confusion here. While we do find everything you've told us intriguing, we didn't come here to get the scoop on this. We're here because we believe the building's haunted, and there are various myths revolving around the asylum. We'd hoped you'd know a little bit about its history.
If I play, I'll add you.
Thankfully,
I
did.
want me to go on
But we still
Roblox
need to
right now
visit the
and see.
asylum and find out what's really going on. Maybe there's even some truth
I
behind
think I have
the myths.
Roblox on my computer.
Mary's expression had completely changed now, and she looked almost pale as she said,
Whatever you do, do not visit that place. Just take the file and release the truth.
she paused before grabbing
Maybe one of
Jessica's
these
arm,
days I'll
saying,
play. I'll just need
That
you to
asylum
teach me
is
how to
no
play.
place for people like you. The devil lives there now. The devil.
Do you know what's fun is Buckshot Roulette. Have you ever played
Jessica
that?
quickly pulled back her arm and got up before saying, Jacob, we should go. I think we have enough. Mary began to frantically look
I
around
should do a
saying,
Fortnite stream.
Don't go.
Maybe on
Don't
Friday
go.
or something.
I got up and thanked Mary before leaving.
need to
with
do all
Jessica
my
and headed to
commercials.
the asylum. Little did I know, that would be the biggest mistake we ever made. I think it was about
Look at I got some Rocket
My
League
entire group was standing at the gates of the asylum.
gear.
We had met up earlier to discuss what we had all discovered. The group that visited the library didn't find much, but they'd managed to find the blueprint of the asylum. We told them about our discussion with Mary and proceeded to look at the contents of the file together. The file contained all sorts of horrible tests and experiments that were done on the mental patients in the asylum. These experiments only led the patients to slowly lose more of themselves until they were eventually void. As time passed, patients began to die, and the asylum decided to bury the corpses on its grounds. What really began to worry the doctor, however, was that the living patients who had already been losing themselves suddenly began to have regular conversations with their dead colleagues. They would be heard laughing,
I wonder how
hysterically,
that-
and calling the names
I
of
got
the
that
dead in
car
the
then.
middle of the night. It didn't take long before the patients who hadn't
cool
been
looking.
involved in the experiments began acting the same way, and eventually, the doctors. It was as if all those in the asylum began slowly losing themselves until they were completely void and could no longer function.
All right, let me see Roblox real quick.
As we looked at the old asylum from outside its gates, it became increasingly obvious nothing good would come from walking through
Do a
its doors.
mukbang video?
The
Okay.
asylum was a three-story building, and it covered around 50 hectares of land. The building seemed way older than Mary's home, however.
I'm
and its
diabetic, I
exterior
can't eat
had
all that
already
much
begun
food.
deteriorating,
It's not
adding
good
to
for
its already eerie look. I continued looking at the building when I suddenly saw a man staring at us from a window upstairs. That's when I said,
You're Fortnite?
"Hey, who
I
the
could
hell
add
is
you on
that?"
Fortnite.
Pointing towards the window. Everyone immediately turned their attention to where I was pointing, but shockingly, there was
I
absolutely
don't think
no
that's
one
how
there.
names go on there.
Haha, very funny. Mason said, assuming I was playing a prank on them.
Press
I
3
was
buttons
standing
if you
concerned
love your
because I
mom.
could've sworn I had seen
Come
someone at the
on,
window.
it's your mom.
Everyone played it off as a joke
See?
and began walking into the asylum. I followed behind and tried to focus on the task at hand, but all I could really think about was Mary's warning. I stepped into the asylum. I immediately felt the temperature go down drastically. The building was extremely cold, and although I could tell by looking at it that no one had been there in years, it didn't in any sense feel that way. It actually felt like
Thank
I
you
had
for
walked onto a
subscribing.
stage and had 1,000 eyes watching. We
Okay,
continued
where
walking
am I
deeper
at?
into
I'm
the
at
asylum,
Epic
looking for
Games.
anything that would explain the paranormal stories that surrounded the building. The floors were still stained with blood,
What
and
are
the rooms
these
were filled with
outfits
chairs and
right
beds
here?
with straps for the patients. The group had stayed
We have
together
new
exploring the
outfits? Is
building
this on-
when suddenly
oh, Olympic
I followed
game?
them into a room, and I was alone.
Official mascots?
I'd assumed they
Free?
were playing a prank on me. Guys, very funny. You've had your laugh, now let's move on and get out of here.
What
I
game
said
is this
expecting a
for? Is this
response.
for...
Instead, I was met with a deathly silence, and the temperature got even colder. I was completely scared and alone in the room.
They're
when
giving
someone
away
walked
free
past.
something somewhere.
I immediately walked out to follow the person, but
I'm
once
gonna-
again,
I'm
there was no
gonna-
one there. At this point, I decided it was better to leave the asylum and wait outside for the others. I turned to leave, but I was met with the sight of a young woman in a gown and rotting flesh standing in front
Wow,
of me.
they're giving this
My
away
heart
for
dropped at
free?
the sight of her, and she was so close to me that
It's
I
like
could feel her
50
extremely cold breath
Said
in
it
my
was
face.
$50 or
The
something.
lady only had one eye intact, while the other was being eaten by maggots and releasing a rancid smell. She slowly got closer and began to open her mouth. I closed my eyes and prepared for whatever was about to happen, when I suddenly heard a scream from upstairs.
No.
I
don't
opened my
know.
eyes to see she
What
was
game
gone,
is this for?
and I immediately ran upstairs to see what had happened.
Where's it?
I looked around upstairs for about 10 minutes before eventually finding Jessica
let me
sitting
go to
alone on the floor
Fortnite.
with her head in her hands.
How come it's saying
She appeared to be mumbling some words I couldn't understand. So I slowly approached
we
her
can
and
play
said,
Fortnite? I'm just not
"Hey,
gonna play
Jess,
right now. I gotta
are
work.
you okay? I don't know what's
You know, I
happening,
work
but
like
we
8
need to
hours a
leave
day
right
making
now.
these
Come
videos.
on." Jessica slowly raised her head and turned to me. She responded with, "But
And doing
Jacob,
commercials
we
for
can't
TikTok?
leave. We have to wait for the others so we can all go together." Jessica had messed up her hair in a way that had her face covered, and the room was so dark I could barely make out anything. But a part of me agreed with her, so I sat beside her and we waited. We had waited for almost 30 minutes in the dark and cold silence, so I figured it would have been a better idea to go look for the others instead. "Hey, do you remember where you lost the others? Maybe we can go find them and leave," I asked. However, I didn't get a response from Jessica. All I got was complete
What is
silence.
this Olympic gold?
I assumed she was probably just stressed
It's like
out
a free
and didn't hear me,
game.
so I said, "Jess, we need to leave soon." This time, Jessica replied, once again lifting her head slowly to face me as she said, "Don't you get it though? We can't leave.
Really? I don't know what
You
it's
have
about.
to stay with us now. All of us. Together." As she faced me, her hair was out of her face, and my heart dropped as I came to the horrific realization that I hadn't found or been with Jessica at all. The woman began to slowly.
What's this Olympic game on Epic?
Her laugh felt like needles piercing through my ear, and before I could react, the room was full of other patients, also partially decomposed. They all joined in with the laughter and began walking towards me. Their stench filled the room, and no matter where I looked, their faces would appear, some more filled with maggots than others. At this point, I was completely lost and could barely hear my own thoughts. My body slowly began to join in with their laughter. I tried vigorously to fight.
Oh, man, I gotta
my thoughts,
log into
but all
Roblox.
my body could do was laugh and laugh. and
Hopefully I
laugh
remember all of it.
until I realized I had lost myself. "Sir, are you all right?" I opened my eyes slowly in response to the voice I had just heard. A part of me wondered if I was still in the asylum hallucinating, but as I regained
Get the gritty. I
consciousness,
can't even
looked
play
around
the
to
gritty.
see
They're
a
gonna
paramedic
steal
attended to
my
group of men.
my
The
money.
police were also on the scene questioning Mary, who had placed a call to inform them we were in danger after we visited her home. I stayed
I
conscious
got
for
the
about
right
2 minutes more
foot creep.
before blacking out
Da, da,
and waking
da,
up 2
da,
days
da.
later in Eastern State Hospital, Virginia. Somehow, I had regained total consciousness and was aware of my surroundings. The rest of them, however, weren't so lucky. They all appeared to be conscious, but weren't in any way responsive to what happened around them. The police informed me Mary had called them, and by the time they arrived, I was found laughing hysterically right behind the asylum's front door. This would mean I hadn't taken up to 11 steps in the asylum, and everything I'd experienced was all a part of the trance. The rest of my group, however, were found a long time later and had remained unresponsive. It's been 9 years since my experience with the asylum. Jessica and the rest of my group were placed in a different asylum. I have since given up on exploring all things paranormal, and I visit them regularly to remind myself what I experienced was real and not just a bad dream.
My
Therapy
name
has been
on
helping,
Fortnite
but I
and
still
all that
feel
is just
patience
a
for my
paw 3.
nightmares. And every day, I wish I had just listened to Mary's warning. I hope my experience has convinced you all that behind every myth, there is some truth. And it is only those who are suicidal that would doubt the existence of the paranormal.
The following story I'm about to tell you may seem unbelievable. I understand that it may pass as just another internet story. I also understand that even though there were
My name
witnesses,
is just a paw 3.
not everyone believes me,
Okay.
nor do my family or friends.
Let's try
I
this.
admit that even though I
Log in? I
question
don't
what I
know if I
experienced is
remember my
real,
password.
but I know it is. It is as real as the marks on my skin will attest. It all happened at my old job.
I
used to
said
have
a
massage
right
parlor in my
foot
garage,
creep.
and to tell you the truth, I really liked it. I always enjoyed being a masseuse, and obviously I studied for it. I'm not going to lie to you. Every once in a while, I received some indecent proposal that honestly ruined my day. But luckily, it happened less and less, and once they got to know me, almost all my clients were regulars. Everything was going more than fine until one day. I got a surprise.
Can I
from
get a
one
shout
woman
out?
who always
Sure.
came to me for massages.
Aria Q Gaming.
Nothing made that
Shout
day
out.
special. The weather was normal, not too hot nor too cold. Nothing had happened to me the day before, nor
All
did
right,
I
Logan,
expect that
thanks for
day to
coming
be
in.
remarkable in any way. I simply got up, had breakfast, and went to work on a day when my agenda was composed of clients I already knew. The first few massages were normal, and I was getting ready for my next client, and that's when the nightmare began. Tim was always a normal man. He was a married man, and he never made any kind of proposition or innuendo to me. Tim had a small build. He was quite short and skinny, but I could tell he went to the gym from time to time. His personality was quite calm. He was a very polite, humble, and shy person. Needless to say,
I don't know. It's
he
not
also
letting me
had
log
a pretty
in.
low profile. I was getting ready to have a quiet session with him, but as soon as he walked in the door, I knew something was wrong. Tim was really very nervous. His face was red, and his relaxed posture was all tense, like he was really nervous about something. I greeted him politely, and he just gave me back a shy and forced smile. Something was happening to him. Hey, Tim. Sorry for the intrusion. But are you all right?
No clowns.
Barbara. Yes, of course. I'm just a little tense.
Oh, I understand. Lie down.
Use a
I'll do my best to
one-time
make you
cold.
better.
Weak. I'd appreciate it. These last few days have been very tense.
Once Tim lay down, with his shirt off, I covered my mouth so I wouldn't scream from the shock of what I was seeing. His whole body was different. He had marks and cuts all over. But these were not marks from a fight, and he didn't look like he had been attacked. The marks were key points of his body. It was like his body had gotten bigger, and his skin couldn't take it. His skin was cut like a t-shirt that he had outgrown.
Oh, maybe it's in my...
It was all very strange. But you know what? It wasn't the worst of it. What struck me most about his back was his hair. Tim was always a very neat person. He was one of those people who hated having hair on his body. From facial hair, to hair on his back, to hair on his legs. The only thing he was naturally accepting of were his eyebrows and the hair on his head. That's why I was so shocked by seeing him the way I saw him. His whole body was full of hair. It was as if this man hadn't shaved for years. When was the last time I saw him? Last month? This didn't make any sense. Had he taken any medication that caused him to have an allergic reaction?
It's not giving me a code.
There's something wrong with my body.
Didn't receive.
What's taking you so long?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tim. I was just looking for the cream. I must admit that Tim's
No clowns.
caught me totally off guard. He would never have spoken to me like that. Somewhat uncomfortable.
Roblox or
I rolled some
Fortnite?
cream on his back and started massaging him. Something was wrong with his back, and I don't mean the cuts or the farting. His back was moving on its own. I thought about telling him to stay still, but quickly realized that would not be possible. All these movements felt involuntary. It was as if something was happening to his back, as if it was changing.
No, not now, not again.
From one second to the next, Tim gave a great scream and began to move violently. Terrified, I just stepped back and dropped the cream. His body began to change rapidly. His muscles swelled, and Tim stopped to scratch violently all over his body. I didn't know how to react. I was alone in my house. Should I scream and alert the neighbors? Wouldn't that put me in even more danger? In the middle of everything that was happening, Tim looked at me with a lot of anger and walked slowly towards me, always scratching, and with unpredictable and uncomfortable movements. Nervously, I grabbed a shovel and told him to back off. In response, he just pulled it out with one hand and threw it to the side.
Yeah,
with some resistance, he
spaghetti
grabbed
casserole.
my neck with his other hand and slowly began to squeeze me. I can't describe to you what I felt at that moment. I tried to resist. I tried to
try
fight
downloading
back,
Roblox
but
on
this
my phone.
person was not the same shy man who always came to me for massages.
All right.
Nothing I did, no struggle or attempt I made to escape seemed to have any effect on him. Make no mistake, I couldn't breathe.
Is that
and
your name?
I was choking, but I felt that rather than drown, I would surely break my neck. I could feel my life slipping away from me as the man focused on trying to kill me. And just as it started out of nowhere, it ended. Instead of continuing to squeeze me until I ran out of air or broke my neck, he simply threw me violently against the wall. Tim threw me with such force that it was a miracle I didn't hit my head against the wall because the damage would have been irreversible. Trying to recover from the blow, I looked up and saw my attacker more furious than ever. He wasn't even focused on me anymore. He was just running all over the garage, destroying everything in his path, screaming desperately, as if he was an animal that had totally lost his mind.
Okay, let me
As
add
he screamed,
friends.
I could see Tim's body move on its own, to
So
which
we
the
got
man only
Kimba.
reacted by scratching, but with such force that I thought he would pull his skin off. It was easy to see that
56572.
Tim, while visibly furious, was also in a great deal of pain. However, none of this made me question what was happening. No matter how much Tim was suffering, I was the victim, and he was the person attacking me. In the midst of his fit of rage, Tim concentrated on smashing the closet, totally ignoring the fact that I was standing
Okay,
next
I
to
got
him.
you.
I took advantage of the situation to slowly approach the huge garage door.
What was
Once
your
there,
name?
I moved it slowly to open it. The
Ahmed,
door was
what's
very
yours?
hard, and I could only open it a few centimeters, which served to let some natural light into the garage. Unfortunately, that light went right into the closet Tim was destroying, which alerted him immediately. Before I could finish opening the door and escape, I felt Tim's shadow
Oh,
behind
I was
me
trying to play
again.
Roblox.
As soon as I turned around and
Is
faced
that how
him
you
once
play it?
more, he grabbed my face with both hands and without squeezing, gave a huge,
Mine
terrified
is a
battle
possum.
cry, with his face almost pressed against mine. That was the most terrifying moment I have ever experienced in my life. Even worse than when he had
Where's
flown me
Roblox
a few
at?
minutes before. His scream.
I don't think I'm in the right thing. I'm in Roblox Studio.
So violent and so imposing.
Do you get paid for
that
making
I felt
things
it
on
pierce
Roblox
my whole
Studio?
body and took away my will to continue
Is it
trying to
Roblox
escape.
Player?
After that scream, he fell to the ground, sitting down, crying with my eyes wide open.
Wow.
Tim was preparing to attack me once more, but at the last moment, salvation came. The garage
that
door
on-
kept opening.
is that on Roblox?
It wasn't opening by itself. Several people behind it were pushing it. They were my neighbors. They were trying to get me out of the house. At that moment, I realized that even though I had not screamed or warned them that I was in danger, they all knew what I did for a living and that I was always receiving people in my garage. Tim's loud and violent screams and all the noise generated by such destruction alerted my neighbors, and almost all of them came to see what was happening to me. Once they had managed to open the garage door, they dragged me out before the eyes of a Tim who, instead of attacking them, took the opportunity that the door was open to run out of the house in his
I
underwear.
added you on Roblox.
All my neighbors came to my rescue.
My name is
and
Apothecary.
immediately took me to the
I
hospital.
can't like write in the
I
chat.
had been saved. I must tell you, that was the last day I saw Tim. Or at least I
That's like
think
my
it
name
was.
on everything.
From that day on, he never showed up
Here.
or posted anything on social media again. His family never responded to my messages or tried to contact me. I never understood what happened to this man and how he went from having such a calm personality to whatever happened that afternoon. I must admit that in spite of everything, I always think about him and worry about him. Since that day, all the neighbors report seeing some kind of animal running through the neighborhood at night. I know this doesn't make sense, but sometimes I
Okay.
wonder, what
This is
if
my
that
name on-
monster is Tim?
This is my name on everything. I don't know what
For years,
party
I've
imp
been the
is.
driver
I've
of
never
the last
seen
bus.
that.
My shift starts
But
at midnight
Apothecary.
and ends at 4 in the morning. Working the night shift has its share of loneliness, of course.
That's like
but
my
I've
name
never
on Roblox.
experienced anything quite like what happened one autumn night. For the first few hours of my shift, everything
Oh,
was
I
smooth.
added you on
A
Fortnite
few
if it's the
passengers got
same
on and
name.
off. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning when I arrived at the last stop before turning around and returning to the vehicle.
Let me see.
The stop was located in a dark and desolate part of town, right next to an old cemetery. There were a couple of dim streetlights, but most of the streetlights were out. As usual, no passengers were waiting at the stop. As I waited for the scheduled time before departing, I
I
turned on
added
the
you
interior
on
lights of the
Fortnite
bus
too.
to check that everything was in order. I was checking my rearview mirror when I saw a flash of movement in the darkness. I turned to look out the rearview mirror, and to my surprise, saw a man running toward the bus.
But I
It
gotta
was
get
not
back to
unusual
work.
for people to be late and trying to catch the last
We'll have
bus.
to play later.
But the way this man was moving struck me as odd. His movements were jerky and erratic, as if he was panicking. When he finally reached the back of the bus,
Right.
panting and sweating, I could see his face.
Let
He was a
me.
middle-aged man with a wild, desperate look in his eyes. I decided to slow the bus down so that this man wouldn't
I
miss
gotta
me.
go on YouTube.
I was never really one of those drivers who enjoy passengers
Thank you
missing
for
the bus
adding
to go
me.
home, especially at times like that. The man got on the bus and sat in the back of the bus. His disturbing smile never disappeared from his face. I looked through the rearview mirror and noticed that there were no other passengers on the bus at that time. The bus resumed its march, and as we made our way through the empty streets, the man began to hum a haunting song. It was an ominous tune that I did not recognize, and his voice had an eerie tone that sent chills down my spine. As we moved on, the man continued his strange behavior. He began mumbling incoherent words and laughed disturbingly. I became increasingly uncomfortable and concerned for my safety.
I don't know where my YouTube
The
is.
possibility that I was dealing with a dangerous person became increasingly real. Finally, the man stood up and pressed the button indicating that he was getting off. This stop was completely deserted as usual. When I opened the door for the man to get off, he just stood there and kept smiling. I asked him to get off, but he did not respond. Instead, he began to walk slowly toward the front of the bus. I felt trapped in my seat, watching with growing anxiety as the man advanced toward me. His smile widened even more, revealing crooked yellow teeth. I realized I did not know how to deal with this situation, and the thought of confronting him directly terrified me. When the man was only a few steps away from me, he finally spoke. His voice was an eerie, icy whisper that made me shiver. "Do you know who I am, driver?" I shook my head, unable to answer. I had no idea who this man was or what he wanted. "Don't you remember? I was one of your passengers many years ago.
Thank
one
you.
night, just like this. But you
Would
wouldn't
you
let
say
me off.
gooning
You
to
had
ice show
fun watching me
speed?
miss the last bus, didn't you?" I had no memory of that.
Gooning to
incident,
ice
but
show
that didn't matter at the
speed,
time.
level 10 Gyat,
I was too
Ultra
scared to think
Phantom Riz,
The man moved
or
even closer.
playing
His face
Skibbity
inches
Kai
from mine.
Central
I could feel his
Simulator
cold, stinking breath
with
on my face.
Ivy Dune.
This
Is
is
more
your
goated.
last stop, driver.
Ice show speed.
Today, it's your turn to stay behind.
Before I could react, the man pushed me back with enormous force.
He commented
I
on
fell
my
to the ground
videos
stunned
on.
as he lunged at me. I tried to scream, but his cold, skeletal hands
Only
closed
boys
over my
will
throat,
pass this
stifling
test.
my words. Looking terrified, I struggled desperately with the man who assaulted me. His eyes, full of fury and madness, were still fixed on mine as his grip grew tighter and tighter. I felt my life slipping away, and an overwhelming panic overcame me. In a last act of survival, I reached for a small flashlight I kept in my jacket pocket. I wielded it with all my strength and hit the man's head with all my might. The impact knocked him back, releasing his hold on my throat. Coughing and gasping, I took the opportunity to pull away from him. As I sat up, I saw
Hey,
the
you're
man
back.
withering in pain
What's
on the
up,
ground, holding his
Ludacris?
head. He looked dazed and confused. Without a second thought, I ran to the driver's door and slammed the safety door of the bus shut, making sure he couldn't
6
reach me.
a.m.
Then frantically, I reached for my cell phone and called 911 for help. The emergency operator's voice calmed my nerves. I explained the situation and the location of the bus. I was promised that the police would be dispatched immediately. As I waited, I held the flashlight in
watching
one
my
hand
videos?
and the
Thank
bus
you.
steering wheel in the other, watching the man on the ground.
I'm posting videos
The man
right
began
now.
to come to his senses, but instead of trying to open the front door or looking for a way out, he just sat there and stared at me. His haunting smile persisted, and it was bigger than ever. He didn't seem to be in pain or show any normal emotion. When the police officers finally arrived, the man was arrested without much resistance. As they handcuffed the man, he continued to whisper incomprehensible words and laugh, which increased my discomfort and fear of him. The officers assured me that an investigation would be conducted and that they would take steps to ensure my
Thank
safety.
you.
After giving my statement to the police,
What am
I
I
made my way
watching?
to the bus stop, shaking and shocked by the experience.
Where's the kittens?
I
Is there
couldn't recall
kittens?
any similar incident, but the thought of having left someone behind on a night like that haunted me. Eventually, the authorities discovered that the man suffered from severe mental illness and had been wandering the streets for years. He was not one of my former passengers as he had claimed. Although that revelation relieved me to some extent, the experience left me deeply scarred.
Thank you for watching my
From
videos.
that day on, nights working on the bus became even more lonely and terrifying for me. Every shadow in the darkness, every haunting laugh reminded me of that autumn night. The story became an urban legend in the area. My night bus, known as the Last Bus, gained an infamous reputation. Though I tried to move on, that sinister smile and the man's icy whispers never completely disappeared from my thoughts. And my nightlife was changed forever. It's undeniable that some people find it easier to find a job than others. The job market is very wide for young university students hungry for success. For me, on the other hand, it's very different. My name is Alfred, and I am 50 years old. But this is not a story about how hard it was to find a job. Today, I will tell you how the job I got, with a lot of effort, is almost the last job of my life. Because of life, I was never able to study or finish school. Looking for a job at my age was really very
Say
difficult.
my name, David.
But I am the only breadwinner in my family, so I had to do it.
Thank you.
Every job I went to,
Love
they
you
told me
too.
different things. Some would tell me that they would call me after
What?
talking
Come
to other
on.
candidates.
I
But
didn't
could see in
move.
their eyes that they knew they wouldn't. Others were more direct and told me I was too old for any job. Even something as simple as a supermarket
Spanish.
cashier.
I only listen to Spanish.
I went from failure to failure. But just as I was giving up, I got an opportunity and started working right away. The job was quite simple. I was going to be the caretaker of a soccer field. The team was pretty humble, so the stadium was pretty modest too. I'm used to everyone at work pretending I'm not there, and when they noticed my existence, it was to ask me for things in a bad way or make fun of me. But this place was different. All the players and workers at the club were really warm and welcoming. They all made me feel a part of a big family that started with the president and ended with me. The people at this job were very nice, and in the beginning, I was very happy. Until I discovered something that changed everything. Although it felt like a warm and friendly place during the day,
Hi.
the locker room was pretty
What's up,
old.
Lindsay?
When no one was in them, they looked abandoned and very scary. To tell you the truth, I didn't feel scared or anything like that. I was a grown-up person, and I wasn't in the mood for superstitions or getting scared just because I was alone. The players told ghost stories and said that the field was haunted. They would tell me to be careful at night when I was alone, but I could tell that they were all laughing and not taking themselves seriously. My first nights guarding the court were pretty quiet. I came close to falling asleep several times. I really had nothing to do, but eventually I would get used to it and have a routine prepared, like carrying a book that I would read after cleaning up. I must admit that I heard several noises inside the locker room or in the facilities in general, but none of them caught my attention. Wherever I go, there will always be noises. If I am scared by each one of them, I would have to dedicate myself to something else. The important thing was that there were no people sneaking into the facility or a rat problem. I was pretty quiet all night and didn't let anything break my peace. Little did I know that this tranquility would give me a false sense of confidence that would endanger my
It was
life.
a cat.
That day, my shift was just beginning. I had just finished cleaning the players' locker room and I was leaving to clean the hallway. But I heard a noise that caught my attention. The noise was coming from inside the locker room.
Yeah, I'm
It
doing
was
okay.
too loud to ignore it. Surely, no animal
Just
could have
going
done it.
live.
It was like a thump as if someone had tried to destroy a dugout, but there was no one there, as I had just exited through the only entrance to that locker room.
I'm making.
Confused, I
I'm
took
just
out
posting
cell
my
phone
videos
and
on
went back into the
YouTube
locker room,
real quick.
recording everything I
I'm
saw.
probably gonna
I
try and
didn't
go to
realize it
bed.
at the time, but during the recording, a terrifying shadow passed by the wall at an enormous speed.
Thank you, Doe.
Even though I didn't see the shadow, I felt like something in the locker room had changed in the 3 minutes I had left. It may have been the same locker room visually, but now there was something about it that terrified me. The place felt icy cold, as if a huge, windless, gelic chill had taken over the whole place. Immediately, I got goosebumps. Not because of the cold, but because I felt that I was no longer alone.
If you
Before
hate
I could
kittens,
react,
keep
the battery of
scrolling.
my cell phone ran out and it turned off, which made no sense because until a few minutes ago, I had it at more than 80% charge without seeing anything. But knowing that I was not alone, I ran out of the locker room as fast as I could. But it was not going to be that easy. Halfway through, I ran out of air and fell to the ground. It was a horrible feeling. I couldn't breathe and my lungs felt like they were going to burst. I gathered all my strength to get up again, but there was someone in front of me. There was a man, a local soccer player I didn't know. Why was he dressed as if he was going to play a match? Confused, I got up as best I could, and at that moment, I realized that something was wrong with this man. His skin was whiter than that of a normal person. It was too pale a white color, unnatural, as if he were dead. His eyes were glassy and his body was full of bruises. The moment our eyes met, the man began to cry tears of blood running down his face at enormous speed. Whatever this was, it was not human. While still trying to catch my breath, I tried to run past him, but he grabbed me by the neck with one hand. As I stood up, the man looked at me with a desperate and sad face and shouted, "You must help me! Who are you? Let
What's
me go,
this joke?
please.
Sending
You
people
have to help me.
messages?
I
Crazy.
didn't ask for this.
No,
I was
I'm
desperate.
actually posting my
married.
YouTube
I have
videos.
a 3-year-old son.
People
He
stopped
can't end
watching a
like
little
this.
while ago
Help me.
anyways.
Hey man, I have a family too. I don't know who you are, but please don't hurt me. I just want to see my family. You don't understand the things they do to me. I can't go back. I don't want to go back. I just want to have another chance to hug my family. I want to see them again. I don't want to do this. I was lost and no one would help me. I beg you, do something. Make no mistake, I was terrified. Every fiber of my body was screaming that I was in enormous danger. But while he was saying these things to me, while this man was screaming at me and squeezing me with his arm, I felt that there was no evil in him. There was desperation. Suddenly, he let go of me and screamed for help again. But this time, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking behind me. The temperature dropped even lower, and even though the light was on, the room got darker and darker with each passing second. I looked behind me and saw a bunch of shadows going from one place to another, slowly approaching where we were. They're here! Don't let them take me, please!
I think I might go
In a
to
matter of
sleep,
seconds,
guys.
the shadows surrounded the whole place, and ignoring me, they threw themselves against the terrified
getting tired.
man. The shadows began to surround his entire
I'll see you
body
guys later.
as he screamed louder and louder in despair. He dropped to the floor and began to smash his his body. And in my presence, something invisible began to drag him around the place until I lost sight of him.